The observation deck of the Arcturian research vessel hummed with quiet anxiety as Chief Scientist Sorrel examined the unusual energy readings. 300 years had passed since humanity's unexplained disappearance from the galactic stage. This event had changed space politics and left behind only empty colonies and unused technology. "Captain, I'm detecting something at coordinates 227 to 8941, said Sorrel, her tentacles moving quickly across the control panel. "It matches nothing in our database." Captain Tevrock moved closer to the screen. The once powerful human territories had been split among other species. Their absence was now just a note in history books. Some thought humans had destroyed themselves in war. Others believed disease had killed them. Some even suggested they had found a way to leave their physical bodies entirely. "Send a probe," ordered Tevrock, "and alert the Galactic Council. Whatever this is, it's coming from what was once Earth's main travel network." The probe approached the strange energy. The ship's instruments detected a massive distortion forming in space. Before they could move to safety, space itself seemed to fold, creating an opening unlike anything they had ever seen. "By the 7 moons," whispered Tevrock as the phenomenon stabilized. "What have we found?" In the central command chamber of the ship, junior officers rushed between stations. The unknown energy signal grew stronger. Tevrock's skin changed color, a sign of deep concern in Arcturian biology. "Send message to Central Command," he ordered. "Priority 1. We found something in former human space." Kehoe, the communications officer, adjusted her translator. "Message sent, Captain. But there's heavy interference. The signal might not reach them for several hours." Tevrock nodded. The waiting was the hardest part. For centuries, the mystery of humanity's disappearance had bothered the galactic community. Humans had been establishing colonies and making technological advances. Then, suddenly, all communication stopped. Ships sent to investigate found empty stations and planets. 6 billion humans on Earth. Gone. No bodies. No signs of battle. No explanation. "Should we move closer?" asked Kilo. "No," Tevrock replied. "We maintain position and observe." In the 300 years since humanity vanished, much had changed. Former enemies became allies. The Arcturians, once barely spacefaring, now had one of the largest research fleets. The aggressive Mulvarax Empire had taken most of humanity's military outposts. The philosophical Zilberry had claimed Earth itself, turning it into a memorial and research site. The probe's data streamed back, showing impossible readings. "Captain," Sorrel called, her voice shaking. "The energy signature. It's similar to theoretical human experiments from before they disappeared. Something about dimensional folding technology." Tevrock's antenna twitched. "You mean the failed experiments? The ones that were considered too dangerous?" "Yes. But this is different. Stable. Controlled. If humans were continuing that research, the implications hung in the air. The final human research on dimensional technology had suggested it could be used to create pocket dimensions, separate realities where different physical laws might apply. Most scientists had dismissed it as impossible. But if they had succeeded— "Sir," Kehoe called out, "the anomaly is growing." On the main screen, the spatial tear widened. Light bent around its edges. The ship's sensors overloaded with data. Tevrock ordered emergency protocols. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Move us back 1 light-minute distance," ordered Tevrock. "Prepare emergency jump coordinates." The helmsman input commands, but the ship responded sluggishly. "Captain, our engines are struggling against some kind of gravitational interference." Tevrock gripped his command chair. After centuries of questions, they might finally have answers about humanity's fate. But at what cost to his crew? On the edges of the anomaly, space itself seemed to ripple. The tear expanded, revealing a darkness deeper than the void between stars. Then from that darkness, something began to emerge. First came the bow, smooth, black, and impossibly large. The material didn't reflect light so much as absorb it. Sensors struggled to determine its composition. As more of the vessel appeared, the crew fell silent. It was larger than any ship in the known galaxy, at least 5 times the size of the largest Mulvarax dreadnought. "By the ancestors," murmured Kehoe. "Is that human design?" It both was and wasn't. There were elements that matched historical records of human ships, the general shape, certain structural patterns, but the technology was clearly far beyond anything humans had possessed when they disappeared. "All scan results are inconclusive," reported Chloral. "The hull material is unknown. Power source unidentifiable. No obvious weapons, but energy readings are off the charts." For 3 tense minutes, nothing happened. The massive ship hung in space, fully emerged from the anomaly, which slowly closed behind it. The Arcturian vessel was tiny in comparison, like a small fish beside a water leviathan. Then, a transmission cut through all frequencies. "This is the United Nations exploration vessel Prometheus. After centuries of silence, humanity has returned." The message repeated in all major galactic languages. The voice was calm, measured, but carried unmistakable authority. Tevrock looked to his communications officer. "Respond, identify us, and ask their intentions." Kehoe sent the message. Moments later, a response came. "Arcturian research vessel Celestial Seeker, we mean no harm. We recognize Captain Tevrock's authority in this region. Request permission to send a representative to explain our absence." The bridge crew looked to Tevrock. Meeting unknown entities was standard procedure for research vessels, but this was humanity. A species thought lost, returning with technology far beyond current understanding. "Permission granted," Tevrock finally said. "One representative only. Our docking bay will accommodate a standard shuttle." "Understood," came the reply. "Prepare for arrival in 20 minutes. Our representative is eager to reestablish contact." As the communication ended, debates broke out among the crew. "We should alert the council immediately," insisted the security chief. "This could be a threat." "Or the greatest discovery of our age," countered Coral. Tevrock silenced them. "We will meet their representative, learn what we can, then report everything to the council." The following 20 minutes were the longest of Tevrock's career. Security protocols were reviewed, the docking bay prepared, a reception committee formed, including Tevrock, Sorrel, and 2 security officers. When the shuttle from the Prometheus approached, it further defied expectations. Just 3 meters long, it had no visible engines, yet moved with perfect precision. It passed through the Celestial Seeker's shields as if they weren't there. It landed silently in the docking bay. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a section of the shuttle's hull simply dissolved. A figure stepped out. He appeared human, matching historical records, but with subtle differences. His movements were too fluid, too precise. His skin had an unusual luster. Most striking were his eyes, dark and deep, containing awareness that seemed vaster than any single being should possess. "Captain Tevrock," the human said, inclining his head slightly. "I am Ta-1, diplomatic liaison of the returned human fleet. Thank you for receiving me." "Welcome aboard," Tevrock replied formally. "Your appearance raises many questions." Ta-1 smiled. "I imagine it does. Where would you like me to begin?" They moved to the ship's conference room. The human declined refreshments but sat comfortably at the table. He seemed completely at ease despite being surrounded by aliens and armed security. "Perhaps," said Tevrock, "you could start with where humanity has been for 3 centuries." "That's both simple and complicated," Ta-1 replied. "We left, deliberately, carefully, and completely. We detected something approaching our region of space, something ancient and dangerous that had consumed many civilizations before. Rather than face extinction, we chose to step sideways." "Step sideways?" asked Chloral. "Into pocket dimensions we created, spaces outside normal spacetime, where we could continue to exist and develop. We took our entire population, our knowledge, our genetic material, everything that made us human. The Arcturians exchanged glances. Such technology had been theoretical at best when humans disappeared. "Why return now?" asked Tevrock. Taiwan's expression grew serious. "Because the threat that drove us away is returning. And this time, it threatens all sentient life in the galaxy." The room fell silent. Tevrock studied the human carefully. If this was deception, it was masterful. If true, it carried implications that would reshape galactic society. "This threat, can you describe it?" asked Coral. "We call it the void entity. It exists partially in our dimension and partially in others. It feeds on space-time itself, breaking down the barriers between realities. When it fully manifests, it consumes everything. Matter, energy, even the fabric of space itself." "And you expect us to believe this?" asked the security chief skeptically. "I expect nothing," Taiwan replied calmly. "But the evidence will present itself soon enough. The entity leaves traces before its arrival, spatial distortions, temporal anomalies. Your scientists will detect them within weeks. Whether you prepare or not is your choice." Tevrock's antennae twitched with anxiety. "And humanity, what do you seek now?" "To rejoin the galactic community, to share some of what we've learned, and, if possible, to work together against the coming darkness." Taiwan's eyes seemed to look through them. "We've changed during our time away, Captain. Evolved, you might say. We're not the humans your history remembers." As if to demonstrate, Taiwan raised his hand. Above his palm, space itself seemed to fold, creating a small model of the galaxy. Specific points glowed red. "These are where the first breaches will appear. The entity's advanced scouts. We have 42 days before they arrive." The news would spread across the galaxy within hours. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council would convene. Defense fleets would mobilize. After centuries of absence, humanity had returned. Change, powerful, and bearing warnings of doom. And it had all begun here, on a simple research vessel at the edge of forgotten human space. The enormous human vessel hung against the starfield, dwarfing all other ships that had gathered in response to the astonishing news. More than 200 ships from 36 species now orbited at a respectful distance from the Prometheus, forming the largest impromptu fleet the galaxy had seen in generations. Inside the central chamber of the Galactic Council station, tensions ran high. The emergency session had entered its third day with little progress. Representatives argued loudly, their translators struggling to keep pace with the heated debates. "We cannot simply accept their return without questioning their motives," shouted Ambassador Kral of the Mulvarax Empire, his scaled skin flushing deep crimson. 300 years of absence, and now they reappear with technology that defies our understanding. With tales of cosmic threats that conveniently position them as saviors. Across the circular chamber, the Zilbari delegate rose, her crystalline form catching the light. "The Arcturian research data confirms anomalies consistent with the humans' warnings. We must listen." The chamber quieted as the main doors slid open. Taiwan entered, accompanied by two other humans, a tall woman with short black hair and a shorter man whose eyes seemed to shift color as he walked. Unlike most delegates who wore elaborate ceremonial attire, the humans dressed simply in fitted dark gray clothing with no visible insignia. The council leader, an elderly Dralid named Vex, gestured toward the central platform. "The council recognizes the human delegation. You may address the assembly." Taiwan stepped forward while his companions remained at the edge of the chamber. He surveyed the gathered representatives with calm confidence. "Honored delegates, I understand your concerns. Our return is unexpected, perhaps unwelcome to some. But the threat I described to Captain Tevrock is real and imminent." He raised his hand, and the chamber's lighting dimmed. Above the central platform, a three-dimensional projection appeared, a map of the galaxy with several regions highlighted. "These are the locations where the first manifestations of the void entity will appear. Within 39 days, These systems will experience spatial tears similar to how we arrived, but with devastating consequences. Ambassador Krall scoffed. Convenient predictions that cannot be verified until after the supposed event. The female human stepped forward without invitation, drawing murmurs of protest. "I am Min," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "Chief Science Officer of the Prometheus. We understand skepticism, but we offer proof." She held up a small device that projected an image of swirling darkness consuming a small moon. This footage shows our first encounter with the entity 300 years ago. It consumed one of Jupiter's moons in our home system before we could fully understand what we faced. The footage showed the moon breaking apart, not from physical impact, but as if reality itself was unraveling at its edges. The delegates watched in uneasy silence. "We retreated to dimensional pockets not out of fear," Min continued, "but because we lacked the means to fight it. We needed time. Time that passed differently in the dimensions we created. We lived, learned, evolved. What was 300 years for you was nearly 1,000 for us." The third human finally spoke. "I am Jin, Strategic Commander. We don't ask for your trust without verification. We propose a joint mission to inspect the predicted breach sites. Send your best scientists with our guidance. See the early signs yourselves." The chamber erupted in voices. Some demanded immediate investigation. Others insisted on quarantine protocols for the returned humans. A few called for military action. Council leader Vex banged his ceremonial staff. "Order. We will proceed methodically. A delegation of scientific experts will accompany the humans to verify these claims. Meanwhile, the council will remain in emergency session." After the formal meeting, smaller groups formed throughout the station. The humans were approached cautiously by various representatives. Some were curious, others hostile, many simply confused. In a quiet corner of the diplomatic lounge, Ambassador Hyun of the New Terran colonies, descendants of human settlers who had been off-world during the disappearance, approached Min. "My ancestors spoke of Earth," Hyun said softly. "They'd mourned for generations. Some attempted to return, only to find empty cities. Why did you take everyone? Why not warn those who were away?" Min's expression softened. "A painful but necessary decision. The entity targets conscious minds first. We needed complete evacuation to prevent it from following our psychic trail. I'm sorry for the pain this caused your people." Hyun studied Min's face. "You don't look 1,000 years old. Our relationship with time and biology has changed," Min replied. "May I?" She extended her hand. Hesitantly, Hyun reached out. When their fingers touched, Hyun gasped. Images flooded her mind, cities suspended in bubble universes, generations of humans evolving physically and mentally, developing technologies that merged with their biology. When Min withdrew her hand, Hyun staggered back. What did you do to me?" "Shared memories. It's more efficient than words. This is how we communicate among ourselves now. You've become something else entirely," Hyun whispered. "We're still human," Min said quietly. "Just more than we were." Across the station, Jin met with military representatives from various species. The Malvarax general, Kastak, glared at him suspiciously. "Your ship carries no visible weapons, yet you claim to be prepared to fight this entity. Explain." Jin smiled slightly. "The entity isn't something you can destroy with conventional weapons. Energy weapons pass through it. Physical projectiles get absorbed. It exists partially outside our dimensional space. Then how do you propose to fight it?" demanded Kastak. "By folding space around it, creating dimensional traps, redirecting its feeding patterns away from populated systems." Jin traced patterns on the table that seemed to leave glowing trails momentarily. "We've developed technologies that manipulate the fabric of space-time itself. Convenient that these abilities can't be demonstrated without risk," Kastak said. Jin's eyes shifted color, darkening to deep violet. "Would you like a small demonstration, General?" Before Kastak could respond, the air between them shimmered. A small sphere of distorted space appeared, within which they could see what appeared to be a miniature galaxy spinning. "This is a dimensional pocket," Jin explained. "Currently stable, contained, and harmless. Similar principles will be used to contain the entity, but on a vastly larger scale." The demonstration silenced Kazdak temporarily, but rumors spread quickly throughout the station. Some claimed the humans could create and destroy matter at will. Others insisted they had achieved a form of collective consciousness. The most disturbing rumors suggested they no longer aged or died naturally. The next morning, a scientific delegation was assembled. 12 experts from different species prepared to board a human shuttle. Sorrel, the Arcturian scientist who had first detected the returning humans, led the group. As they approached the shuttle, Taiwan welcomed them. "The journey will take approximately 6 hours to reach the first anomaly site. The experience may be disorienting for those unaccustomed to dimensional translation." "Translation?" asked Coral. "Not travel. We don't move through space conventionally," Taiwan explained. "We translate from one spatial coordinate to another by temporarily stepping outside this dimension." The interior of the shuttle contained no visible controls, just comfortable seating arranged in a circle. Once all were aboard, the walls became transparent, giving the impression they were sitting in open space. "Please remain calm," said Taiwan as he took a central position. "The first translation can be startling." He made a simple gesture with his hand. The scientists felt a momentary sensation of being turned inside out, though painlessly. The starfield around them blurred, stretched, and then snapped back into focus. "We have arrived," announced Taiwan calmly. Thorl checked her instruments in disbelief. "That's impossible. We've traveled nearly 40 light years in seconds. As I said, we don't move through space conventionally." Outside the transparent walls of the shuttle, they could see a red dwarf star system. Taiwan directed their attention to a seemingly empty region of space between two small planets. "Watch carefully. The dimensional fabric is already thinning here." The scientists adjusted their instruments. Slowly, they began to detect subtle disruptions in the background radiation, fluctuations in gravity waves, and microsecond variations in the passage of time itself. "The entity leaves these traces as it approaches," Taiwan explained. "Within 15 days, a tear will form here. 3 days after that, the first physical manifestation will begin." "And what happens then?" asked a Zilbari physicist. "The planet nearest the breach will start to decay at the quantum level. Its matter will unravel. Any conscious beings will experience psychic trauma before physical dissolution." The scientists recorded everything, comparing notes, confirming each other's readings. Even the most skeptical among them couldn't deny the anomalies they were detecting. As they prepared to return, Sorrel approached Taiwan privately. "These changes to the dimensional fabric, they're similar to how your ship appeared. Are you certain your return didn't accelerate this process?" Taiwan's expression remained neutral. "A reasonable question. No, our dimensional technology is fundamentally different. We create stable transitions. The entity tears the fabric completely. And if we help you fight this entity, what then? Will humanity disappear again once the threat is contained?" Taiwan was silent for a moment. "That is yet to be determined. Some wish to return to our dimensional havens. Others believe it's time to rejoin the galactic community. But first, we must all survive." When the scientific team returned to the council station, their findings caused a sensation. The evidence was clear. Something was indeed affecting space itself in exactly the locations the humans had predicted. Emergency protocols were activated across the galaxy. Evacuation of the threatened systems began immediately. Military vessels were dispatched to create defensive perimeters. On the third day after the scientists' return, Council leader Vex called for a formal alliance. In a historic ceremony, representatives from all major powers signed the Mutual Defense Accord, officially welcoming humanity back into the galactic community. As Taiwan signed on behalf of humanity, subtle energy rippled around his hand, making the document glow momentarily. a small demonstration of their changed nature, but a powerful reminder of how different they have become. That night, as the various delegates celebrated the new alliance, Jin stood alone by a viewport, watching the stars. Hyun found him there, her expression troubled. "The questions I asked Min. There's something she didn't tell me, isn't there? Something about what humanity really became during those 1,000 years." Jin turned to her, his eyes shifting to a deep blue. "Every species has its secrets, Ambassador. Even before we left, humanity was on the verge of transformation. The dimensional exile simply accelerated what was already beginning. And after this threat is contained, what then?" Jin looked back to the stars. "Then we all discover what it means to share a galaxy with beings who have touched other dimensions. Change is coming for everyone, not just humanity. The only question is whether we face it together or alone." The shuttle moved silently through space toward the massive Prometheus. Inside, 12 representatives from various species sat in nervous anticipation. This was the first official delegation permitted to visit the human flagship since their return. Hyun, the ambassador from the new Terran colonies, pressed her hand against the transparent wall as the enormous vessel grew larger in their view. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Beside her, Sorrel adjusted her scientific instruments. "The outer hull is absorbing most of my scans. I can't determine what it's made of." "We call it dark glass," said their guide, a human named Da. "It's a composite material that exists partially in this dimension and partially in another. It makes conventional scanning difficult." The shuttle approached what appeared to be a solid section of the hull. Instead of opening, the surface simply rippled like water, allowing them to pass through. No docking mechanisms, no airlocks. The delegates exchanged nervous glances. "How is this possible?" asked the Zilbari representative. "The boundary between dimensions is more flexible than most believe," Day replied casually. "With the right manipulation, solid matter can be temporarily phased to allow passage." They emerged into a vast, open chamber bathed in soft light that seemed to have no source. The ceiling arched high above them, creating an impression of standing outdoors despite being deep within the ship. Small groups of humans moved about, some talking quietly, others apparently working on invisible interfaces. "Welcome to the Prometheus," said a new voice. A woman approached, her movements graceful and precise. "I am Admiral Su. Thank you for accepting our invitation." The delegates followed Admiral Su through corridors that seemed to form as they walked and fade behind them. Nothing resembled a conventional starship. No control panels lined the walls. No visible technology operated the vessel. Instead, humans occasionally made subtle gestures in the air, causing changes in their environment. "Where are your crew stations?" asked General Kasdak of the Molvarax. "Your weapon systems. Your engine room." Su smiled. "Those concepts don't quite apply to our current technology. The Prometheus is operated by a collective consciousness network. Those you see making gestures are interfacing with the ship's systems directly through thought." "Impossible," muttered Kasdak. "May I?" Su extended her hand to him. After a moment's hesitation, the general allowed his scaled hand to touch hers. His eyes widened in shock. For a brief moment, he felt himself expand beyond his body, connecting to a vast network of minds that operated in perfect harmony. He sensed the ship as if it were an extension of his own body. When Su released his hand, he staggered back. "What did you do to me?" he demanded. "I temporarily included you in our network," she replied. It was the simplest way to demonstrate. They continued the tour, moving deeper into the vessel. In one chamber, they observed humans seated in a circle, their eyes closed, small points of light dancing between their foreheads. "They're sharing consciousness," explained Da, "transferring memories, experiences, knowledge. What might take years to learn can be shared in minutes." "Is this how you advanced so quickly?" asked Chloral, fascinated despite her caution. "Partly," admitted Su. "But our time in the pocket dimensions accelerated our development in ways we hadn't anticipated. Time flows differently there. What was 300 years for you was nearly 1,000 for us, and in isolation, with the focused goal of survival. Evolution takes unexpected paths. They entered a larger chamber where a group of humans appeared to be training. They moved in perfect synchronization, occasionally phasing partially out of visibility, or manipulating small objects without touching them. Our physical forms have been enhanced, Dad explained. Nanomachines in our bloodstream regulate every aspect of our biology. Our nervous systems have been redesigned to channel dimensional energy directly. Even our genetic code has been optimized. You're no longer human, said Hyun quietly. Sue turned to her with a gentle expression. We are still human in all the ways that matter. We feel, we love, we create, we mourn. We've simply expanded what humanity can be. In another area, they observed children playing. Their game involved creating small dimensional pockets that they passed between them like bubbles. When one bubble popped, it released a shower of light that made the children laugh. Even your children can manipulate dimensions, asked the Zilbari representative. They're born with the neural pathways already formed, said Da. The abilities develop naturally as they grow, and it was. Unlike the practical, angular designs of most galactic ships, the Prometheus featured smooth, flowing lines that seemed to bend light around its obsidian surface. No visible engines or weapons marred its perfect form. It resembled an enormous black teardrop suspended in space. And aging? Asked Horal. The rumors say you no longer die. A momentary silence fell over their guides. Finally, Sue answered, we experience time differently now. Our cellular degradation has been slowed significantly. A natural lifespan for us now extends several centuries. But we are not immortal, merely extended. The final chamber they visited was the heart of the ship, the vast, circular room with a central platform surrounded by what appeared to be liquid darkness swirling in patterns. This is our dimensional core, explained Sue, the interface between our reality and the pocket dimensions we created. It allows us to draw energy directly from the dimensional boundaries. As they watched, several humans entered the chamber and took positions around the core. They raised their hands in unison, and the swirling darkness responded, forming complex patterns that seemed to extend beyond normal space. They're communicating with other ships, said Dai. Instantaneously, across any distance, the dimensional boundaries touch all points in space simultaneously. This technology, said General Kastak, his military mind racing with possibilities, it could make your species unstoppable in warfare. Sue's expression hardened slightly. We did not develop these abilities for conquest, General. We developed them for survival. First our own, now everyone's. As they prepared to return to their shuttle, Hyun lingered behind, approaching Sue privately. The new Terran colonies were descended from humans who were off-world when the disappearance happened. Are we? Could we also evolve as you have? Sue studied her thoughtfully. Your genetic foundation is the same as ours was. But our evolution wasn't entirely natural. It required specific conditions within the pocket dimensions, targeted genetic modifications, and neural reconfiguring. It wasn't without cost. What cost? Hyun asked. Some didn't survive the process. Others lost their sense of individual identity in the collective networks. We had to relearn what it meant to be separate beings as well as connected ones. Sue hesitated, then added, there are those among us who believe we should offer the process to human descendants who wish it. Others believe it would be cruel to force such a transformation on those who have developed their own distinct culture. Before Hyun could respond, an alarm sounded, not harsh like conventional emergency systems, but a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through their bodies. Sue's expression changed instantly. Her eyes unfocused briefly, then sharpened with new intensity. The first breach has formed, she announced to the delegation. Earlier than predicted, we must return to the council immediately. The shuttle journey back was tense and quick. Using their dimensional translation technology, they arrived at the council station in minutes rather than hours. The station was already in chaos, with emergency protocols being implemented across all sections. In the central chamber, Taiwan stood before the assembled council, displaying a holographic image of a distant star system. The tear has appeared in the Proxion system, he explained as the delegation entered. We projected it would form in 13 more days, but the entity's movement has accelerated. Could your presence have caused this acceleration? Demanded Ambassador Krall. No, replied Taiwan firmly. But our instruments can now give you real-time data of the effects. The holographic display zoomed in on the small planet nearest the spatial tear. Already, its atmosphere seemed to be shimmering unnaturally. Sensor data scrolled beside the image, showing radiation spikes and gravitational anomalies. The planet has approximately 72 hours before complete dissolution begins. It's uninhabited, but the next planet in system has a mining colony with 7,000 souls. Council leader Vex stood. Evacuation orders have been sent. What can be done to slow this process? We've dispatched 3 of our vessels to establish a dimensional barrier, said Sue. It won't stop the entity, but it should redirect its approach away from the inhabited planet. As the council debated emergency measures, Jin approached the delegates who had just returned from the Prometheus. Now you've seen, he said quietly. Now you understand what we face and what we've become to fight it. Sorrel nodded slowly. Your evolution wasn't just about survival, was it? You were preparing specifically for this moment, to return and face this entity. Yes, admitted Jin. For 1,000 years, every advancement, every modification, every technological breakthrough has been directed toward one goal, developing the means to trap the void entity permanently. Can you succeed? Asked General Kastak, his earlier suspicion now tempered with grudging respect. Jin's eyes shifted color, darkening to a deep blue. Not alone. That's why we returned. The final phase of our plan requires resources and cooperation from all major species. The entity feeds on dimensional energy, the very energy that powers our technology. To trap it permanently, we need alternative power sources that only your civilizations can provide. As the delegates absorbed this information, a new alert sounded. On the main display, they watched in horror as the spatial tear in the Proxion system suddenly expanded. The uninhabited planet near it didn't explode or break apart. It simply began to unravel, its matter seeming to dissolve into the growing darkness. It's happening faster than even we predicted, said Sue, her voice tight with concern. We need to implement containment protocols immediately. How? Asked Council Leader Vex. We need volunteers from all species, said Jin, addressing the entire council now. Those willing to learn to work with our dimensional technology. The entity responds differently to different consciousness patterns. A unified approach, combining all sentient perspectives, provides our best chance. As murmurs spread through the chamber, Hyun stepped forward. I volunteer, she said clearly. As a descendant of original humanity, I may provide a unique perspective. One by one, representatives from other species joined her. The galaxy was facing an unprecedented threat, and the response would require an unprecedented alliance, with the evolved humans who had returned from centuries of silence leading the way. The industrial world of Neros 9 bustled with activity under its 3 pale suns. Mining platforms floated in the upper atmosphere, extracting valuable gases, while below, sprawling cities housed 6 million beings of various species. In the central control tower of the capital city, Supervisor Tarak reviewed production reports with mild satisfaction. The past week had seen record outputs, partly thanks to the new energy systems recently provided by the returned humans. Sir, called his assistant, there's an unusual reading on the upper atmosphere sensors. Tarak sighed. Equipment malfunctions were common in the harsh environment. Run a diagnostic. Probably just. His words died as he looked up at the main viewing screen. High above the planet, a small area of space seemed to ripple, as if reality itself was vibrating. The ripple expanded slowly, forming a dark tier that resembled nothing Tarek had ever seen. "Contact Central Command immediately," he ordered, suddenly remembering the emergency broadcasts that had been circulating. "Tell them we have a void anomaly." Before his assistant could send the message, the communication system activated on its own. A calm human voice spoke. "Attention Naros 9 Central Control. This is the human vessel Guardian. We have detected a dimensional breach in your upper atmosphere. Initiate immediate evacuation protocols. This is not a drill." Across the planet, emergency sirens blared. The population, already briefed on evacuation procedures following the humans' warnings, began moving toward designated spaceports. Transport ships launched in carefully coordinated waves. High above, 3 human vessels appeared through dimensional translations, taking positions around the growing tear in space. From each ship, beams of focused energy created a triangular barrier, temporarily containing the anomaly. On the bridge of the Guardian, Commander Jin coordinated the response. His consciousness was linked to the ship's systems and to the other vessels in their formation. "The tear is expanding faster than projected," reported his second-in-command, Mina. "Containment field at 70% capacity and dropping." Jin's eyes shifted color as he accessed deeper levels of the dimensional network. "Redirect power from non-essential systems. We need to hold the barrier until evacuation is complete." A holographic display showed the evacuation progress. Nearly 40% of the population was now off-planet, with transports continuing to depart every 2 minutes. But it wouldn't be fast enough. "Commander," Mina's voice was tight with concern. "Something is emerging from the tier." The dimensional breach pulsed, darkness spilling out like liquid shadow. Unlike the smooth transition of human vessels, this movement seemed wrong. Reality itself protested as something pushed through from another dimension. The containment field warped under the pressure. "All ships, strengthen the eastern vector of the containment field," ordered Jin. "We need to channel it away from the main population centers." Through their shared network, Jin felt the strain on the human operators as they channeled dimensional energy through their enhanced nervous systems. The barrier held, barely, as a tendril of darkness probed its edges. On the planet below, Tarek watched in horror as the sky darkened unnaturally above the northern continent. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly in his sector, but reports from the north were becoming fragmented and strange. "People just vanishing," came one broken transmission. "Buildings unraveling at the edges," reported another. A transport ship rising from the northern spaceport suddenly shuddered on the tracking display. It didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, disappearing from sensors as if it had never been there. In orbit, the Council Emergency Response Fleet arrived. Ships from 12 different species forming a protective cordon around the evacuation routes. Among them was the Arcturian research vessel Celestial Seeker, now refitted with special sensors designed by Xorl based on human technology. "The dimensional tear is still expanding," Xorl reported to the fleet commander. "And the void energy readings are off the scale. Whatever's coming through is bigger than anything the humans described." On the Guardian, Jin received the Arcturian data and felt his enhanced heart rate increase. "This is a full manifestation," he said to Mina. "Not just a scout like we anticipated." "But that means—" "Yes," Jin's voice was grim. "The entity itself is arriving, much sooner than we expected." He opened a channel to the Council fleet. "All vessels, maintain distance from the anomaly. Conventional weapons and shields are ineffective against the entity. Focus on evacuation protection only." "And what will you do?" came the voice of General Kastek, commanding the Mulvarax battle cruiser. "We're implementing Containment Protocol Omega," replied Jin. "Stand by." The 3 human vessels adjusted their positions, their dimensional cores pulsing with increased energy. The barrier they maintained changed from a simple triangular shield to a complex, layered structure that began to fold inward, pushing against the darkness. Aboard the Guardian, Jin addressed his crew through the mental network. "We need to establish a dimensional pocket to isolate the entity. It will require full consciousness integration. The crew understood what this meant. Full integration risked the loss of individual identity. Minds merged so completely that they might never fully separate again. But it was the only way to generate enough coordinated dimensional energy. One by one, the crew members agreed, their consent flowing through the network. Jin nodded to Mina, who initiated the integration protocol. Across all three ships, the human crews entered a deep meditative state. Their individual consciousnesses began to merge, forming a collective mind that could perceive and manipulate dimensional energy with unprecedented precision. The barrier around the void entity changed again, folding in impossible directions, creating a pocket of space that existed partially outside normal reality. The darkness fought against the containment, tendrils of anti-reality lashing out. Where the tendrils touched the human vessels, hull material simply ceased to exist, creating jagged gaps. Emergency systems sealed the breaches, but the structural integrity of all three ships was compromised. On Naros 9, the evacuation had reached 70% completion when the northern continent began to disintegrate. Not through explosion or destruction. The land simply unraveled, matter dissolving into nothingness. The process accelerated with each passing minute. In orbit, Sorrel watched in horror as her instruments recorded the planet's deterioration. "The atomic bonds are breaking down," she reported. "Reality itself is being rewritten at the quantum level." Aboard the Guardian, the merged consciousness of the human crew pushed against the limits of their capabilities. The containment field fluctuated as the entity fought against it. "We can't hold it alone." Jin's voice echoed through the shared mind. "We need more power, different consciousness patterns to stabilize the field." A new voice joined the communication channel. "This is Ambassador Hyun of the New Terran delegation. We are prepared to assist." A smaller vessel approached the human formation, a shuttle carrying volunteers from various species who had been training with human consciousness linking technology. Though they lacked the advanced neural modifications of the returned humans, they brought something equally valuable: different perspectives, different ways of perceiving reality. "Link with us," Jin directed. "Focus your thoughts on the containment field. Visualize it as solid, impenetrable." Hyun and her team of 12 volunteers activated the neural interfaces the humans had provided. The connection was crude compared to the humans' seamless integration, but it created a bridge between their minds and the collective consciousness. The effect was immediate. The containment field stabilized, strengthened by the diverse consciousness patterns. The void entity's movements became more restricted as the dimensional pocket tightened around it. "It's working," reported Mina through the shared mind. "The pocket is forming correctly." But success came at a cost. As the containment strengthened, the void entity lashed out with greater force. One of the human vessels, the Defender, suffered a critical breach as a tendril of darkness cut through its dimensional core. Jin felt the deaths of its crew through the mental network, not as pain, but as sudden silence where voices had been. The collective consciousness adjusted, redistributing the strain, but the loss weakened their control. "We cannot maintain this configuration." Mina's thought was clear in the shared mind. "The pocket is unstable without the third vector." Jin made a decision. Guardian will move to replace Defender's position. Prepare for close orbital maneuver. The Guardian adjusted its trajectory, moving deeper into the dangerous zone around the entity. As it did, the strain on its dimensional core increased exponentially. Power fluctuations rippled through the ship's systems. On the Council Fleet's command vessel, Admiral Vex watched the human ships with growing concern. "Their hulls are failing," he reported. "The void energy is eating through their protective fields." Sorrel studied her readings. "They're attempting to create a stable dimensional pocket to trap the entity, but they need more power to complete the fold." General Kastek made a sudden decision. "All Mulvarax vessels, advance to position Delta. Prepare to channel all power to the human ships on my mark." "That's against Council orders," warned Admiral Vex, "and potentially suicidal. If those human ships fail, we all die anyway. replied Kastak. "Better to die fighting." 5 Mulvarax battle cruisers moved into formation around the human vessels. They activated their experimental energy transfer systems, technology recently developed through collaboration with the humans. "Channeling power now," announced Kastak. Raw energy flowed from the Mulvarax ships to the struggling human vessels. The Guardian's dimensional core stabilized, its containment field strengthening once more. Within the collective consciousness, Jin felt the additional energy flowing through their network. "Now," he commanded, "complete the dimensional fold." The merged minds focused their combined will. The containment field began to collapse inward, forcing the void entity into an increasingly small pocket of space-time. The darkness fought violently, sending out pulses of anti-reality that damaged everything they touched. One of the Mulvarax ships vanished instantly when a pulse hit it directly. 2 others suffered critical damage. But the power transfer continued from the remaining vessels. On Neros 9, the disintegration had reached 80% of the planet's mass. The final evacuation ships were launching, carrying the last survivors. With a final, coordinated mental push, the human collective consciousness completed the dimensional fold. The pocket closed around the void entity, sealing it in a space between spaces, not destroyed, but contained. The tear in space began to shrink. The darkness receded. On instruments throughout the fleet, void energy readings diminished rapidly. But the Guardian was now critically damaged. Its hull had been reduced to a skeletal framework in many sections. Its dimensional core was unstable, reality fluctuating around it. "We can't maintain structural integrity." Minna's thought came through the weakening mental network. Core containment is failing. Jin made his final decision. "All consciousness to the dimensional network. Prepare for emergency translation." As the Guardian began to break apart, the merged consciousness of its crew shifted into the dimensional network itself, not into physical space, but into the boundaries between dimensions where human minds had learned to exist. The ship disappeared in a flash of energy, leaving behind only scattered debris that quickly dissolved into nothingness. On the Council command vessel, Admiral Vex stared at the empty space where the Guardian had been. "Are they gone?" Thorol checked her instruments. "No conventional life signs, but I'm detecting unusual energy patterns in the dimensional frequency." She looked up, her expression both awed and troubled. "I think they survived, just not in any form we would recognize." As the fleet regrouped and rescue operations began, Hyun stood alone at a viewport, watching the remains of Neros 9, now reduced to less than 20% of its original mass, a broken remnant of a once thriving world. "Is it over?" she asked as General Kastak joined her. The Mulvarax general's scales had paled from exertion and stress. "No," he said quietly. "According to the humans, this was just the first manifestation. The entity exists across multiple dimensional planes. What we contained was just one aspect of it. Then we need to prepare for the next battle," said Hyun, her expression hardening with determination. "Yes," agreed Kastak, "and we need to hope that Commander Jin and his crew find their way back from wherever they've gone." In the space between dimensions, in a state neither fully conscious nor truly physical, Jin and the crew of the Guardian still existed. Their merged consciousness drifted through planes of reality most beings could never perceive. And there, in the dimensional borderlands, they sensed the larger presence of the void entity, watching, waiting, preparing its next assault on the universe they had sworn to protect. The observation deck of the Council command vessel hummed with tense energy as representatives from every major species gathered to witness the final confrontation. Through the massive viewport, they could see Earth, humanity's ancestral home, now surrounded by a protective fleet of over 500 ships from across the galaxy. Admiral Vex studied the tactical display with concern. "The dimensional anomalies are increasing. We're detecting tiers forming in 12 locations simultaneously." Beside him, Hyun nodded grimly, just as Commander Jin predicted before the Guardian was lost. 3 weeks had passed since the battle at Naros 9. The void entity, though partially contained, had continued to manifest throughout the galaxy. Each appearance had been met with increasingly coordinated resistance as species that had once been rivals now fought side by side. The Mulvarax battle cruisers formed defensive lines alongside Zilbari shield generators. Arcturian scientists worked with Dralid engineers to modify ships with dimensional stabilizers based on human technology. But the cost had been tremendous. 17 worlds had been partially or completely lost, billions of lives displaced, and no one knew if Commander Jin and his crew had truly perished, or if they existed in some form beyond conventional understanding. "The final human vessel approaches," announced a communications officer. All eyes turned to the viewport as the Prometheus appeared, not through conventional space travel, but through a dimensional translation that made it seem to simply materialize near Earth. The massive ship now bore scars from previous battles, its once perfect hull marked with patches of different materials, where void energy had eaten away the original structure. "Admiral Su requests permission to board," the officer continued. Minutes later, Admiral Su entered the observation deck, accompanied by Tadwan and 2 other humans. Their appearance had changed subtly. Their skin had a faint luminescence, and their eyes shifted colors with their thoughts. "The entity is preparing its final assault," Su announced without preamble. "What we faced so far have been merely aspects of its true form. Now it comes complete." "How can you know this?" asked General Kastak, who had become one of the strongest supporters of the Human Alliance since the battle at Naros 9. "Because we've made contact with Jin and the Guardian crew," replied Tadwan. The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives. Sorrel stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overwhelming protocol. "They survived." "How?" "Not in physical form," explained Su. "Their consciousness exists now in the dimensional borderlands, the spaces between realities. They've been observing the entity, learning its patterns, finding its weaknesses." "Can they return?" asked Kun softly. Taiwan shook his head. "Not to physical form, but they can communicate with us through the dimensional network. And they've given us the key to defeating the entity once and for all." At his gesture, a holographic display appeared in the center of the deck. It showed a complex structure of interconnected energy patterns surrounding a central void. "This is the dimensional cage," explained Su. "A trap large enough to contain the entity's entire form across all dimensions it exists in. But to create it, we need power beyond anything we've generated before." "What kind of power?" asked Admiral Vex. "The combined power of every ship in this fleet," replied Tadwan, "and the conscious focus of representatives from every sentient species." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Such a plan would put every defender at risk, concentrating their forces in one location. "If we fail," General Kastak said bluntly, "there will be no second chance, no remaining forces to continue the fight." "If we fail," countered Su, "there will be nothing left to fight for. The entity will consume this galaxy and move on to the next." The debate raged for hours as tactical options were considered and discarded. Finally, Admiral Vex called for a vote. One by one, the representatives signaled their agreement. The plan would proceed. Preparation began immediately. The combined fleet arranged itself in a complex formation around Earth, not to defend the planet, but to create the energy pattern needed for the dimensional cage. On the Prometheus, Sun Li coordinated the human operators who would channel the dimensional energies. Though not an admiral like Su, her particular talent for dimensional manipulation had placed her in charge of this critical operation. "The dimensional anchors are in position," she reported. "All ships report ready." Across the fleet, volunteers from every species had taken positions at specially designed interfaces. They would provide the diverse consciousness patterns needed to stabilize the cage across multiple dimensional planes. Han led the team aboard the Prometheus, she and 11 others representing the major species of the galaxy. Each wore a neural interface modified for their specific biology, allowing them limited access to the human dimensional network. "Are you ready?" Sun Mai asked them. Hyun looked at her team. Thorol with her analytical mind, General Kastak with his warrior's discipline, and representatives from 9 other species. "We're ready," she confirmed. "Then we begin," said Sun Mai. "The void entity will be drawn to our combined energy. When it manifests, we must complete the cage quickly before it can attack." The human operators entered a meditative state, their consciousness partially merging as they had been trained to do. Through the dimensional network, they'd felt a distant presence, the disembodied awareness of Jin and the Guardian crew, guiding them from the borderlands. The energy pattern began to form between the ships, visible as shimmering lines of force that connected in 3-dimensional geometric patterns. But the humans could perceive the true structure extending into dimensions beyond normal perception. "Energy output at 70%, reported Ta-1 from the command center. Dimensional stability holding." The void entity responded exactly as predicted. The space directly ahead of the fleet began to darken, not with the absence of light, but with the presence of something that absorbed light, matter, and reality itself. "It's coming," announced Sun Mai. "All ships maintain position. All operators focus on your assigned nodes." The darkness expanded, forming a tear in space larger than any they had seen before. The entity began to emerge, not a solid form, but a shifting mass of anti-reality that hurt the eyes to look upon. "Energy output at maximum," called Ta-1. "Cage structure at 80% completion." The entity seemed to sense the trap. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, striking at the nearest ships. 3 smaller vessels disappeared instantly, their matter completely unmade. A Mulvarax battle cruiser lost half its structure but continued to maintain its position in the formation. "We can't hold this for long," warned Admiral Vex. "The fleet is taking heavy damage." Sun Mi's voice remained steady. "We need 2 more minutes to complete the cage. Every ship must hold position." Through the dimensional network, Jin's consciousness reached out to them. Not in words, but in pure thought. "The entity fears the cage. It's preparing to retreat. We must close all dimensional pathways simultaneously." Sun Mai relayed the message. "All operators, prepare for final sequence. On my mark, channel all remaining power to the cage anchors." The void entity lashed out with greater fury. The Prometheus itself shuddered as a tendril of darkness carved a path through its lower decks. Emergency systems engage, but the damage was severe. "Hull breach on decks 12 through 17, reported Ta-1. "Dimensional core stability at 40% and falling." "We won't get another chance," Sun Mai said. "All operators, channel now." Across the fleet, the volunteers focused their minds through the interfaces. The human operators on the Prometheus deepened their mental connection, drawing power from the dimensional borderlands themselves. The cage structure pulsed with energy, its pattern completing as the final connections formed. The void entity seemed to realize the danger too late. It tried to retreat, pulling back into the tear it had created, but the cage followed, extending into the same dimensional spaces. "It's working," exclaimed Thorol, her scientific mind registering the entity's movements. "The cage is containing it." But the strain on the ships and operators was immense. Power systems throughout the fleet began to fail. On the Prometheus, the dimensional core fluctuated dangerously. "Core stability at 15%, warned Ta-1. "If it fails, the cage will collapse." Sun Mi made her decision. "Transfer all power from life support to the core. We need to hold the cage just long enough to complete the seal." "That's suicide," protested General Kastek. "It's necessary," replied Sun Mi calmly. "Prometheus will maintain the primary anchor point. The rest of the fleet should withdraw to safe distance once the cage is sealed." Admiral Vex recognized the logic, though it pained him. "All ships prepare to withdraw on my command. Maintain cage energy until the last possible moment." As the void entity fought against its imprisonment, the cage continued to tighten. Jin and the other consciousness from the borderlands added their energy to the structure, strengthening it from dimensions the physical ships couldn't reach. Cage seal at 95%, reported Tadwan. Core stability at 8%. Sun Mi turned to Hyun and her team. You should evacuate. Take the emergency shuttle. Hyun shook her head. We stay until it's done. The final moments of the battle happened in quick succession. The cage sealed completely, trapping the void entity in a prison of dimensional energy. The Prometheus's core reached critical instability as it channeled the last of its power to reinforce the seal. All ships withdraw now, ordered Admiral Vex. Maximum speed. As the fleet pulled back, the Prometheus remained at the center, its systems failing one by one. Sun Mi maintained her connection to the dimensional network, guiding the final adjustments to the cage. It's done, she announced, her voice peaceful despite the chaos around her. The cage is self-sustaining now. The Prometheus began to break apart, its structure unable to withstand the dimensional forces it had channeled. But instead of a conventional explosion, the ship seemed to fold inward, compressing into a point of brilliant light. When the light faded, the Prometheus was gone. In its place remained a strange distortion in space, a permanently sealed dimensional pocket containing both the void entity and those who had sacrificed themselves to imprison it. In the days that followed, the galaxy began to heal. Representatives from all species gathered to sign a new treaty, one that acknowledged humanity's sacrifice and established a new order of cooperation unprecedented in galactic history. Admiral Vex addressed the gathered delegates. We must never forget what was given to save us all. The humans who returned from centuries of silence did not come as conquerors, but as guardians. Hyun, now appointed as the lead ambassador for human interests, stepped forward. They are not gone, she said quietly. The crew of the Prometheus, like those of the Guardian before them, exist now in the dimensional borderlands. They will watch over the cage for eternity, ensuring the void entity never escapes. And the remaining humans? Asked General Kastak. Will they disappear again to their pocket dimensions? Tadwan, one of the few human representatives left, shook his head. No, our place is here now, among the stars. We've established settlements on several worlds. We'll share some of our technology, medical advancements, sustainable energy, faster travel methods. Others will keep secured, for the safety of all. As the new galactic charter was signed, observers noted something unusual. The document itself seemed to glow faintly when certain representatives touched it, as if responding to some energy beyond normal perception. Rumors spread throughout the galaxy in the following years, stories of human settlements where reality seemed more flexible, where the boundaries between dimensions occasionally thinned. Tales of ships in distress mysteriously assisted by forces that couldn't be seen. Accounts of void-like entities appearing in distant systems, only to be quickly contained by unseen guardians. The official records simply stated that a new age had begun. The Pax Galactica, an era of unprecedented peace and cooperation between species. But those who had witnessed the final battle knew the truth. Humanity had not returned to rule, but to protect. Changed by their centuries of isolation, they now served as guardians of reality itself, part of this dimension, and yet connected to others beyond perception. And sometimes, on quiet nights aboard ships passing near the dimensional cage, communications officers reported strange signals. Not words exactly, but patterns that seemed almost like thoughts, reassuring those who listened that the watchers remained vigilant, that the sacrifice had been worth it, and that the void entity would remain imprisoned for eternity. The end.